This show was previously broadcast live on ProgressiveRadioNetwork.com.
Welcome to another edition of Expanding Mind. I'm your host, Erik Davis, and once again we'll be exploring the culture of consciousness. One of the funny things about consciousness is it can always ask a question about the reality that it's perceiving. No matter how authentic your experience may be, the hard pound of the table, the sharp pang of desire or disappointment, the recognition of a new truth, understanding how the Pythagorean theorem works or what was really going on in ancient Greece or whatever, that no matter how we construct or experience our reality, we can always question it. Seems to be one of the implicit dimensions of consciousness, is that it can try to step outside of itself, or at least outside of the world that it perceives itself to be. And is this a good thing or a bad thing? Hard to say. Sometimes people, in questing after deeper meaning in life, a sense of trying to discover a more primal source of experience of the meaning of the world, of who you are. They move through these questionings. You start to question your ordinary experience, your job, your personality, your family, your the secular ideas that you've been raised with if you're raised a modern person, and you begin to open up other possibilities. And as you move into those other possibilities, sometimes people turn that questioning off. They distrust it because they associate it with the world of science or the world of skepticism or the world of journalism. And instead, as they discover their deeper sources, they want to turn off this questioning. And that's one way. But there's another way where the inquiry never stops. The questioning never ceases. Every place you land becomes a moving target. And that too can become a spiritual path or a way of understanding the world, and one that I'm very much a fan of. And one of the reasons that I have come to really embrace this path of inquiry has been my encounter with today's guest, Mr. Danny Castro, who is difficult to characterize and describe his marvelous way through the world, but the emphasis on inquiry is key. This question about questioning, which I think is really an important one when people are looking at issues of consciousness, at expanded awareness, at the deeper reality of things. But first, I'd like to bring on our co-host Maja. Maja, I got a question for you. How about you? Do you ever stop questioning? Do you ever get to a place where you're like, okay, that's it, I'm done?
Oh my God, dude, my brain is like a beehive. Like, I have always been that way too. From the time I was a little kid, it's just constant questions. And I mean, I was one of those kids that would just drive my teachers nuts, constantly asking questions to, the priest at church. Just everything is question. So do I ever feel like that I've questioned enough? I don't know. I mean,
but does it ever feel like it's a little bit of an escape or a little bit of a trap that you're like that? Do you ever feel like, wow?
Oh yeah, sure. Like after obsessively asking the I Ching questions for like hours and hours, you can get to that point where you're like, okay, this is just kind of ridiculous now. But it does, that inquiry, it leads to this kind of obsessive compulsion, and then that kind of like brings it to your awareness that, okay, like all this question asking is leading to something, and then you kind of like scoot back from it a little bit and take a view of what the kind of answers you've amassed are and what they mean. So it's important to pull out like that and see the results of the inquiries and not just keep asking,
Yes, it's a very supple dance, and as I said, I part of my own dance moves I've learned from Mr. Danny Castro. Danny, are you on the line?
Yes.
Excellent. Good to hear from you. You're in New Mexico, right?
Yes, I'm in Santa Fe.
Beautiful.
And in fact, Naropa is here also. He's listening on the other end.
Very good. Hello, Naropa.
Hey,
Another crony. You're welcome to pop in, by the way. I didn't know you'd be here. That's always a delight. So, just as a short way of framing Mr. Castro, I'd like to say that he grew up in New York and went to India in the 60s and got deep into the Indian mystic trip and became disenchanted with it, and on his way out of that scene discovered and encountered his own teacher who opened up this path of inquiry, a path that Danny's been on ever since. And there's so many wonderful phrases and ideas that you have brought forth, but I think I want to start out with the schmuck number 2 philosophy. Can you explain the schmuck number 2 philosophy, Danny?
Okay, schmuck number 2. Well, it's based on a joke, and it's a wife says to her husband, in a contest of schmucks, you would come in second. And the guy is really hurt by that. And he says, why wouldn't I come in first? And she says, because you're a schmuck. So knowing that somehow schmuck number 1 is withheld, but that you can have a comfortable schmuck number 2 existence, probably in a lotus position, and be a contender, one would have to be a schmuck to come back into the world when they've solved the riddle of self and the world itself. What would bring you back into the world? And it would seem to me if someone or something loves you so deeply that it compels you back into the world, you assume the identity of that attraction, more like an actor assuming a role in order to bring about another dimension. So I feel that one would need to be, there isn't surely the invitation to you to assume an identity, no longer that you are born an identity and you have a continuum of identity, but an identity that comes out of the death experience. And I'll give you a for instance, if I may.
Sure.
When I received the news that I had cancer, I immediately experienced Maharshi's experience that my body had cancer. Danny didn't have the cancer. Danny was still Danny. The body logically had a cancer that it inherited. And when I perceive that, when we're talking about questioning, the questioning is inherently there. With the news of cancer, I saw that my father secretly had it 50 years earlier. And it was kept secret, but everyone knew. And I realized at that moment that I looked away from my father as a kid. And I knew he wasn't my father. He was a mystery to me. He was a secret man. He was doing father. And when I saw how alone my father was, that he wasn't father at all, I saw the facade of fatherhood. And I saw that we all agreed to look the other way. I saw I never met my father as a human being at all. I never even gave him a human dimension. As I met him as a human being so alone in there, the idea of father diminished. And when I thought this man hurt me so badly, I saw how badly I hurt this man purposely. And the story of me changed. My history was dependent on not giving humanity to my father or to my mother, not even perceiving that they had humanity anyway. So once you saw the other...
That's a great theme for right now, because of course so many people are with their families, and however much they might sort of miss or love their families in the abstract or in principle when they're amidst their lives, that once you're in the presence of it, all of these things become very real and very, very intense. I mean, how does somebody break through that mask with
well,
the
you
living
see,
relative?
The breakthrough is it's avoiding the perception. The perception came home to you that your history, that the literal father denied you an evocative relationship with the father. The real relationship with the father was the evocative spiritual relationship. The literal one was the survival relationship. So the survival relationship denied access. Only if you read their diary on death would you see that these people were 99% unknown human beings to you, maybe 1% parents. And the struggle has been around that. And no matter what end run you try to make around that, I don't see that it's possible. You see that the family has always been missing an honest conversation. And I don't know that the evocative conversation is usually only in retrospect. So once you have the death experience in that way, the death experience was being told you have cancer, not the literal cancer. The evocative news showed you that there were parallel lives being lived that you're unaware of. Once you see the parallel lives, you're no longer relating to your father as strictly a father. You understand that it's more metaphor for a parallel body of experience. I hope it's not too windy.
Well, it's literally a body of experience because, I mean, our parents tell their stories through our bodies, like you said, like getting...
But in order to function as an identity, we have to suppress and repress most of that.
Right. Well,
I'm
and
saying
deal
that
with it, like when you...
90% of my father was repressed by growing up and needing... the family construct and surviving suppresses 90% of its existence. It accesses it in retrospect. But can you access it while it's happening? It would seem to me that the ego would need to surrender in some. To give your mother a life, you would have to die as a child, probably. I don't know. That may be too complicated an explanation. But when it happens rather suddenly.
And in the case that's sort of what happens with identity across the board, is that we have this sort of given identity that we grow up with, and that it seems like the step of evolution or inquiry or whatever you want to call it involves a whole series of deaths, of recognizing that is partly a construct, that it's a mask.
Well, we have a vested interest in maintaining relationship as a continuum. It's only in retrospect, when the mind is freed from the possession of it, that it sees the relationship was never around the literal. It was around the evocative. So we spend our time trying to keep the relationship together. When something happens that confronts us, we're forced to reflect on the nature of this thing that we've lived in and taken for granted. Whenever we come to that state, it's very scary because the possessive falls away. The literal falls away, and we see that we've had an evocative love affair made out of thin air, that it has no logic to it. It had its own beauty, and its beauty was not literal. So if you meet your parent, not as a parent, but as any stranger could have met them, in 5 minutes they could have known their heart and soul in 5 minutes, and we would take 3 lifetimes to meet our parents that way. To give them a life is to awaken your own life, not as a literal person, but you understand that there are parallel lives being lived in yourself. And I feel once the energy is released that way, then inquiry is second nature to you. It is no longer a nitpicking inquiry. It is more of a director or a writer talking to the main character, dialoguing.
Can you go into that? That seems to be a very powerful metaphor you talk about, is that relationship of the writer to the character as a model for these different perspectives that we can bring to our lives.
Somehow the writer sends a signal to the main character that it's moving in a mystery. So when that shift takes place in the character, they understand that relationship is representative of the mystery, and that it's always in flux. Any possessiveness of it leaves you with a literal thing. So the energy inherent in the relationship around the spiritual or creative life, relationship is not a possessive, it's an evocative energy that awakens. The loss of the relationship can send you to a place that you can't defend against, and no matter how many hours of meditation. In fact, you see that you're utilizing meditation to offset, to avoid the experience. That inherently we are running away from an inherent hurt in our being. And relationship takes us out of that, and the loss of that immediately sends you to that place. I don't feel the loss of the relationship causes that hurt. I feel it reveals that hurt.
Because it's
Be
there
with
from
that
the
hurt
get-go.
and not have a way out of it is to understand where humanity is held and where you're holding yourself. That one has lived in fear of that place throughout their life. And that fear is motivated to lie. I feel in our time, relationship and its loss can send you immediately to that place without any way to, that we have a date with that experience.
Yeah, one of the things that's very striking about your perspective on things is the role that relationship plays. I think a lot of spiritual people don't really acknowledge the contradictions and the opportunities of relationship from the perspective of the spiritual path, and even in the way that they think about what a holy person is. There's a certain way in which a whole realm of sexuality, of desire, of love relationships is kind of suppressed or undermined or given short shrift. And yet, from speaking with you, I've learned to really think things very, very differently. That in a lot of ways, one of the main not faults, but problematic areas of at least traditional ideas, say Hindu ideas of a guru or a spiritual or enlightened master, one of the places that is most problematic is precisely in this dimension of relationship. I mean, was that part of what you're turning away from the full Hindu mystical trip had to do with recognizing how more important relationship was to our experience?
I feel that no matter what level of accomplishment you're in, there's an experience waiting for you in the world. And it would seem to me that we're talking about something different now. Sexuality in the world has become organized into addictive elements, so it's never satisfying. Sensuality is something different, that one dies and returns in a love affair. Then the sexual aspect is not the dominant principle in a sensual relationship. It's an aspect of it. So there's more, it's not performance-oriented, it's not ego-oriented, but obviously any addiction cannot be satisfying. It has to be spurred on by more and more theater. So one coming back from that death experience into a love affair is coming from a different place. They're no longer coming from release. Relationship that is created in a mutual perception, meaning that the continuum has been interrupted and re-examined, and the people are entering into the place consciously. That sexuality and that sensuality is coming from a different place. It's no longer excitement-oriented, it's deepening. It's touching. The orgasmic movement in that is in the deep feeling. It is no longer isolated. So I feel but one, again, that's the schmuck number 2 philosophy. That one can sit in a yogic position in the Himalayas, content, and that one comes back for a girlfriend. That Jesus gets off the cross and comes back for a girlfriend is not what we would like to hear. I wouldn't mind hearing that, because I feel that many of these guys would have left their perch, that there is no conclusive realization, but that it's ongoing.
So
but
in a way,
the invitation into the world, sensually, is, I feel, comes with complexity. No answers. You're in it yourself. We're all in love relationships that are neither here nor there, that are up in the air, that exist and don't exist, have Vedantic principles. No matter how much we've tried to contract them in, they're elusive. The fact of our relationship is that they are elusive, and that they do send us to deep place. So it's already happening. It's not that we have to then acquire another sense of how to achieve that. We're in it.
When you talk about this, I really feel like, and other things that you talk about, that you're articulating a kind of path or a kind of style or movement through spiritual life, through creative life, through a life of inquiry that's related, but in some ways very different than the more traditional ideas of a spiritual path or spiritual practice. There's a kind of maybe it has more of the artist in it, or has more of even the hipster in it. There's some kind of movement through something that seems very very American to me, in contrast to other ways.
I do feel that that in effect we were discussing this morning, that when I'm meeting folks, I'm seeing that they have organized themselves karmically. And traditionally also, they've karmically organized themselves. When I'm meeting them, I feel that we're interrupting the karmic movement and adding a dharmic sense to it. Now, of course, the karmic is always going to continue itself, but in retrospect, it'll remember a moment. So in our meetings and in what you show and what you're doing is you are introducing a dharmic element into these karmic frameworks. Anything that becomes a continuum, an expression, starts to dumb down. It seeks to avoid the very thing that it's looking for. So when we assume traditional forms to avoid, then however much we're meditating, we cannot achieve that level because we're utilizing the system. We've marketplaced, we've mass marketed yoga to a feel-goodism, not something that deeply and relentlessly explores its life.
Well, that's something that you talk about that I really liked, which is very tantric, which is how, a big thing that you mentioned is that achieving stopping running away from pain and kind of going into the pain and going through the pain as a path
with it, but not as out of will, but because you're choiceless.
Right.
In other words, I'm not talking about inquiry as something that we do. I'm saying that there's recognition that there's something inherently filming our lives that will access in time. When we can't do anything about it, there will be moments that will flash and we'll see. So the inquiry is happening. There are moments that you recognize that it is happening. But whether you can actually introduce inquiry, let me inquire about, it will always be elusive. The energy is watching you approach it. It has an illusion that gradually you're approaching it. I feel that inherently the thing that you're seeking is watching you, seeking it, and it's inviting you. So you can do any practice that you wish, and some of these practices are refinements of processes, but no practice will get you into that space unless it invites you into that space. So I would use the dialogue of the main actor talking to the director. The actor, it will be revealed what happens in time. But it will spoil the act if the actor knows more than he can know. So the director sees the mystery. The actor is moving in the mystery. The actor becomes a Buddhist, a Jew, or this, tries to become something. The director sees the nothingness, the emptiness, the mystery surrounding. Before we were born, there was a mystery. When we die from the body, there's a mystery. We're surrounded the mystery. The story of us we think is us. I say we are the mystery. We are not the story that we were in. That's Erik, who is doing the story of Erik. When we meet as Erik. The story is put on hold for a moment. We attempt then to re-enter the story from a fresh place. So I feel that most of these relationships are creations. They exist, they don't exist. Sometimes they're much more evocative and lost and in absence. They send you to places. And when you've taken on a creative life, then surely the relationships are creative by nature. It's where they send you that matters. That place is real, and I feel that place is where the energy is hiding, where the mind won't go. So throughout our life in these relationships, we try to avoid that place. And in the loss of relationship, it sends us immediately to that place. I feel the energy is hiding in that place. And the brain and the mind are doing everything they can to resist that experience. To be with that place is to meet the human condition, I feel, in that. That's the death experience, not the physical death experience, which is rather minor compared to that, but the death of one's own history as a self. To see your father as a human being is to change your own history. You see that it's not literal, it's evocative history that we have. And that these love relationships that we have are evocative relationships. They exist more in absence than they do in presence.
Is that an ongoing process, Danny? That kind of passing through that kind of death experience, or does it, in your experience, since you've watched so many people and been talking to so many people for so long, do you see it as a gradual thing? Is it abrupt? Is it something that just keeps coming and going and weaving in and out of a life?
Well, you see, most of the teachers, the greater teachers, their intimate relationships are denied access. So we have the teachings structurally without the intimate understanding. So no matter how accomplished we become with the teachings, there will still be a yearning inside of us. So, and we won't be able to understand it, even though one is an exact disciple. Something is missing, and you see that there was an intimate life that's missing. So that's not usually discussed. I think Aurobindo tried to explore sensuality in the yoga of love. But that also came out of where the Holy Mother ran away from her husband. It came out of intrigue and attraction also. But they were the first written attempt that I remember to explain a supramental energy through sensuality. So I think there are a few, and all of, since my lifetime of exploration here with my friend Dr. Kaushik and others, it has been an exploration that has included sensuality and love affairs, and it's still non-conclusive. It's still unfolding.
Tell me more about Dr. Kaushik. How did you meet him?
I came from a background that I was really in trouble during the whole 50s and 60s, in jails and drug use, and then I would have personal epiphanies or wake-ups that would shift things for me very deeply. And then I met a teacher in Central Park West, actually, who invited us to India. And I went there with a full expectation of really making a breakthrough, other than the ones I had made personally. And I studied in the Himalayas with this mantra yogic technique that was very tough, and I was almost dying there of dysentery going through this whole thing. And then one day again I woke up and I saw it was a delusion, that even if it was accomplished, and I couldn't even deny the form, but for me, again, it was absurd. I knew it was absurd. So I left that place, broke and really strung out, and in India. And someone mentioned this fellow doctor, so I went over to his place. When I got there, he was having a fight with his wife. The whole setting was absurd. But a few weeks of conversation took me to really an intense place of simply seeing. But only because my life had reached the lowest level could I had to always come to a low level before there was a breakthrough for some reason. And when I left Doctor and I went home, I met my wife, my daughter, my house, her boyfriend. No one needed me. It was a death experience. Everything that we had discussed in India was manifesting for me, in front of me, and it dissolved. What looked like a concrete existence or history, in fact, dissolved in front of me. It's as if I passed away, and I saw that life went on without me. And in fact, I was an intrusion to the status quo. So from that day, the conversations that I shared with Doctor, and he also went through remarkable changes, where the next time that I met him, a year and a half later, we joined forces again in Woodstock, New York, and recreated something between us. And lots of friends joined us, and something came out of that. And when he passed away, there was a diaspora of that form. And it just carries on with me and with others.
And it is largely conversation. I mean, talk about the whole. What strikes me from what I've gathered from you and from reading a little bit of Dr. Kaushik is there's the conversation between friends is, rather than being sort of something that happens on the side of the practice, like the practice is Zen meditation, and then between periods the couple friends talk on the side. Instead of having it be on the side, it's actually at the core of what's happening in the experience?
Well, when the experience is a shared moment, and then people part, even though they go back into their lives, that thing that was shared also goes into the life with them. So I feel that is then creating a question in the circumstance. So any time that you shared a moment and the person has a sort of gestalt shared in a moment, depending on their desire, if a person meets you in a clear desire to meet, it creates a stage for a creative happening. But if the person is in therapeutic need, then you have to bring it to, the energy can't be realized without there being a clear sanity. And sanity to me would be as if you were an accomplished actor, that you are assuming a role wholeheartedly with your whole being, and yet a part of you is reserved for being sane human being. So in order to inhabit that human being deeply, there had to be a core strength of sanity. Plain sanity, a Spinoza-like sanity of seeing. That you have no axe to grind, you have no trip in the world, there's nothing in the world you need. You have no trip at all. It is purely an exploration now. When you come back into the light from the death experience, especially by invitation, compelling invitation, it is pure exploring of the human condition. It is no longer trying to be spiritual. You are spiritual. You are now exploring the human condition. There are friends and lovers to meet in the world. That's your work, is to meet your friends and lovers in the world. It doesn't pay that well.
and isn't art also an aspect of that? I mean, you love and collect art and film, and you think a lot about these things as well. How does creativity or art play a role in this process you're talking about of coming back into the world of
Okay, so friends that have come into my life have introduced film and art, and so in interacting with them, I've come to appreciate the dynamics inherently there in creative art. So I don't know that the creative arts is a way towards the understanding, but having the understanding and then exploring the art through friendship. A byproduct of that is that I've bought into a lot of insane theories around me where I see the thread. So each object that I see also represents a moment, a whack-out Marx Brother moments oftentimes with characters. And I've come to understand the thread that runs through the world, through the art world. Now, when it comes to the art marketplace, then you can have the marketplace then starts to presume itself to be the art in a way. So at that point, any exploration takes you into the heart of darkness. Any trip into the world, into the center of who's running things, takes you into a dumbing down of the human condition. So you see that the people who are running the market have nothing to do with art. They have to do with market. Once you meet market, you see it becomes increasingly devoid of, it capitalizes on the human experience, but it's completely dumbing down of the human experience. So I'm introduced to the world through friendship.
It's like following friendship as the opening.
The kind of creative friendship is the entree into the world. You assume the persona of the friendship. Then you're invited into corporate world. So at that point in time, you understand Maharshi's being in it but not of it. Once you perceive it, that you're in it but you're not of it, meaning that you're free to leave. When I visited Vanity Fair or Condé Nast, it was nice to leave. Others had to stay. So you have, in the inquiry, you have freedom. Not just abandonment or anything like that, but freedom is where you are. You are volunteering yourself to this experience. Relationship is no longer a mandate. You are taking a chance because creatively you know where it can send you.
Well, let me ask you something, Danny. I know part of what you said is that you get to, that place where the energy is hiding through loss of relationship. And you mentioned that for you, a lot of these things have happened through crisis, right? And something, kind of perceivably terrible happens. Do you think, or have you ever experienced getting to the place where the hiding energy or making these breakthroughs without some kind of total crisis or pain or loss, that it's possible while the relationship is happening to kind of unlock that hidden energy without having
I'm saying the radical loss captures the experience. There are systems inherently in the body that deny you the full experience. So they'll introduce guilt or blame or hurt or wound or, you understand? But these to me are protective. The body and the brain, the ego sense of self, I don't think can be overcome because I think they are protecting the energy. The person is too dumb to be with the experience. They have to go through certain things in their being to be with something deeply. So what is happening is that I feel that the body and the brain protect itself from the experience. It's their death. So only a deep love can send you to that place. Now, obviously, if the deep love is there in death, then you're still having a conversation in the absence of the body, just as if the person's in France and you're in New York. They still exist for you, and sometimes even more tenderly and deeply in absence. A love that has death in it still has that conversation going. So existence is no longer based on physical existence. It's based on that creative dialogue. If it's lost in betrayal, it sends you to a lower chakra where your body doesn't work, where there's a purgatorial sense. I feel when you lose the love, you understand a purgatorial sense of existence, and that much of humanity is in a purgatorial sense. And that's why the society is addictive. That there is a purgatorial sense in the absence of that love. And that there is a yearning that runs through humanity and each individual. When one recognizes that yearning, then it's for something very real, not for something superficial. I feel that the recognition of that allows you access to the heart of the other.
Have you found you've been able to accomplish something like that?
I feel that I've come back from that into the world, and that I'm moving now in relationships that have sought me out, or that's the part of our dialogue, is that we're creating a theater where people can access it in time, looking back at it, like we just spent some time with Erik and Jennifer. So I feel we just created a kind of evocative theater where people, as what happened with me, the experience and the conversations I had with Dr. Kashuk manifested immediately. I arrived in Brooklyn at the time. It was right there in front of me. So I feel that we're creating a theater of friendship between us that allows that access. But not to avoid the pain. See, normally the mind would avoid the pain, but you're deepening the pain away from the self into your creative self. Do you know what I mean by that?
I think so. I mean,
to be with it is almost impossible.
Right.
To be with the hurt. The hurt is faking you out into the world. But to be with the hurt is to experience another dimension. You see that it is dialoguing. It is deepening you as a person.
It is. It's true. I mean, I had that experience when I was giving birth. My first birth was very painful, and it got to the point where literally, I mean, the pain, you can't go anywhere from the pain, or I couldn't. I was not on any medications, and I just had to be exactly with the pain. There was no kind of escape from it. There was no getting away from it, and then I kind of went through that experience of coming through it out on the other side and actually, having a pretty gnarly experience kind of psychically with my baby inside my body. But I think for most people, just accomplishing that of being there with the pain. I think you're right. I think it's
well. I mean,
extremely
something in you is there with it because you're able now to access it in time, where you're both able to have the experience and be free from it at the same
right.
time. So you see that time takes away the possessive of the moment. While you're having the experience, you're possessing it. But
right.
looking back at it 10 years later, you see that you were only a player in the experience. And so you see the whole picture. The more time has passed, the less it's about you, and
right.
the more it's around this story that you're in. So we'll see in retrospect that we have been absent for most of our life. In playing out the drama, 90% of our existence is missing. That's why I'm saying if you read your mother's diary, you would see that it was a woman you never met before,
right.
even though you kind of intuited it. So the retrospect, especially if you're in the spiritual world in some way, or the meditative world, the retrospect of existence shows you what really happened. And it also shows you that you were absent for most of it, but something in you was not absent. That something in you that was not absent is you. There's the story of you, and there's you. And somehow you've always intuited a deeper you inside the story. So you access that you when you're nonviolent in yourself, when you can't do it. Doing is inherently violent. The person, if they saw too much, would try to do something about it and try to organize it. So somehow there must be helplessness to get a peep into one's own existence. And you see that your own life is a mystery to you. And there will be a time when it's revealed, but the body will do everything it can to avoid that experience.
One of the wonderful things about this way of talking about, particularly the idea of being of
but let me, as
retrospection.
I say, one moment, if I can,
Sure.
because then I say, when I meet you, then I see the experiences that are hidden from you. And then I see the story that you're presenting me with. So you think the story you're presenting me with is you, but I see this larger mystery around you as you. So then I may have to create a dialogue with you based on the desire for you to access the larger story, and that may be in time, that some people in 20 seconds would perceive it, depending on their desire, and some may take 2 or 10 years before they have enough retrospect to see the moment that we've shared. So it happened for me that as soon as I got to Brooklyn, I saw the conversation I had a week earlier with Dr. Kaushik manifesting. For some of us, it may take years, but I feel that this conversation we're having is now manifesting in our lives. So looking back at the birth experience, you see that the energy had the experience. You were a player in it.
Right.
And there were 4 or 5 or 10 lives being affected by the experience at the same time. And each one of them have their own version of the experience.
Right.
Yeah, for me, I keep coming back to that model of the story of the author and then the character. That part of what the cultivation of that perspective, that retrospective move is of course the author's perspective of sort of being able to move into that space. And what I find really refreshing about that idea is that I think especially in the way spiritual life and spiritual practice has been constructed in the West, there's this emphasis on like be here now. It's all about like cutting through the past and future of the mind to get to the moment, and like that somehow in the moment there is this release or recognition
it's also built
or
to
perception.
avoid the moment.
What's that again?
I mean, it's obviously in the moment whether it perceives it or not.
Right. But there's a cultivation not away from that experience of being in the moment, whatever exactly that means, but also recognizing the role that memory and perspective across time plays in liberation, in opening up the self, moving it away from strict identity towards a larger, more spacious feel that, as you say, is evocative. It's sort of
Well,
acknowledging
they've
the
been trying
importance
to
of that.
create that for 1,000 years or so. Gestalt perspective, where there is a Gestalt takes place that allows you a retrospective. But again, the inherent motive in that denies its full accomplishment. It refines processes. But still, I feel that when one perceives, we'll say that there is a certain point where the main character, through its collapse, sees that it's relating to a mystery. But it's the author that's in the mystery. So it doesn't limit the main character to a linear existence. But the main character, a sense of knowing is important to it. So it tries to identify with things. So no matter what it identifies with, it has an inherent understanding that it's not true, essentially. And that it has a date with its own dissolution. Inherently in the body, inherently in the brain, and inherently in the ego sense of self, is that it has a date with its own dissolution. So part of it is spent looking over its shoulder.
How have you seen this work affect people over time? I mean, there's some people you've been in conversation with for, 30, 40 years and, decades of work. How do you, does this kind of approach manifested in the way people live lives and make decisions and do things, or is it a kind of knowledge or a kind of experience that happens within the context of life as it's lived? Does it mark a difference in how people move through the world?
It marks a difference only in the sense that it's not accomplishment or finalization. It's not based on that. Everyone that I have met that has become a teacher or is a teacher, they're all self-created characters. So everyone has been touched for a moment and then expresses themselves out in the world. Usually, they revert back to their characteristics, but they're also carrying another dimension with them. There are moments waiting. So I feel that we are constituting most of the people who are trying to explore the nature of their lives are constituting a parallel group of people, or parallel tribe of people. I feel that they've always existed and will continue to always exist. They're not incorporated into the literal way of living. So most of the roles that we are assuming are more theater than they are biological and part of the continuum. We are assuming being fathers and mothers with each other. We're assuming, we can assume being daughters and sons evocatively and out of a kind of beauty, not because it's mandated. In fact, because it's mandated, you can't reach the person's heart.
That seems like almost a sign that you're off, is when you're experiencing things or relationships or whatever under a mandate. That's almost like immediately a sign that, like, whoa, the depth here is being lost. And even if you still go ahead and embrace that relationship or do that activity, there's a way of releasing it from a mandate that seems part of that deepening process.
Well, being free people will meet different paths, and some of them have interests. When you free the energy, then in interaction with friends, as I say, how the art came into my life, is that then people who are coming into my life who are fully evolved in what they're doing. And so then you may pick up certain elements of what come your way creatively. So I feel that the creative discovery of yoga is something qualitatively different than doing yoga. Doing yoga towards an end has an absurdity. But doing yoga as being yogic, that you are in fact a yogic being whose life is yogically expressed. Okay. So the use of yoga towards a certain experience of enlightenment, to me, it's in the frustration of the form that it may awaken in another level of enlightenment, but not through the form.
That's a really good example, I think, because I think a lot of people they think that there's certain motions they should do, right? Like you say a mantra enough times, you get a certain goal, you do the hatha yoga form enough times, then you kind of get it. But they're doing it not consciously. They're not aware. They're not, they're not, like you say, maybe breaking out of that perception in order to really get into the depth
because
of what that experience is
the motive goes into the form.
Yeah, exactly.
We were kidding around with the Orthodox Jews who do Buddhism. And so he said, okay, it must be a Jewish form. So I say, well, what is the Jewish? I said, Jewish has a motive to continue.
But the form is necessary. It's very confusing because if they didn't have the yoga form, they couldn't get to some of those deep realizations. So the form is necessary.
Yes.
But they confuse it.
It is a dual thing. It does indicate how deeply it's yearning. So Jewish guys doing yoga is not as dumb as it's seen. It does indicate that the Jewishness isn't enough. There is still a yearning.
Yeah.
But what happens is that they incorporate the form into their history. Do you understand? So instead of it being a vehicle of a deeper expression, it becomes incorporated into the status quo.
Yeah.
It's like they were telling me that Condé Nast was now employing these Buddhist teachers to teach the staff who worked in this corporate job. So the corporate characters are now kind of utilizing Buddhistic meditation as a way of being better at the job.
Totally.
So there's something in corporate thinking that starts to dictate. When yoga becomes a health movement, it misses the point of what it was deeply about. I think it still will work. I saw a big statue of Buddha in Las Vegas there by one of the hotels, and it still had majesty, even though you see it was around gambling.
Yeah.
Well, I always think about that with yoga in particular. I mean, there's just so much.
I say, even though they distort metaphorically what it's about, it still is about that. So even if you're using the yoga to get tighter buns, it still is about a deep place in yourself, not so much your image.
Deep in your buns, it's felt.
Deep in your buns of steel. To go with abs of steel, I'm working on here. I'm working on abs of steel.
How's that working out for you, Danny?
You can't have buns of steel, why not? Although buns of steel doesn't sound that attractive, actually.
So do you have any jokes, Danny?
Oh boy. A waiter asked 3 Jewish women, "Is anything okay?" A woman is walking past a pet shop, and the door is open, and there's a parrot perched there. And the parrot calls out to the woman and says, "You're cranky, you're on everyone's case, you're confused all the time, you're probably getting menopausal, you're just too much." So she gets really offended, and she calls the pet shop owner, and the pet shop owner says to the parrot, "Look, man, you screw with my customers anymore, and I'm going to fry your ass." So the next day, the woman walks past the parrot and looks at the parrot and says, "Yes?" And the parrot gives a look to the woman and says, "You know." Okay, those are 2 dumb jokes for the moment. I have a few others better. But I'm saying that family becomes you know. That somehow the shared history becomes the reality of the people. And so when you see that what's missing is that there's a thread that runs through it. So we've just had a time here with my mom also where she came here to die. And we tried then to share a time with my mom that was not around being mom, but about being a woman, and it was remarkably intense. Next time we speak, I'll explore it a bit further. Okay?
Yeah. Well, we have a few more minutes here. Hey, Naropa, do you want to say anything? You've been on the line, right?
Wow. Yeah, I've been here the whole time.
What stuck in your head? Anything trigger from this conversation?
Well, everything is triggered. I kind of have an experience often with Danny where there's not so much that questions arise as I kind of enter a more reflective space. So I just find myself kind of the words just start to sink, and they don't really find bottom. You just kind of keep moving, and my consciousness follows that path, so it just sort of deepens.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for me because it's, I think a lot of what people are looking for or opening up through all sorts of means is different dimensions of identity, or loosening up our kind of literal identity, as Danny says, and having these other kinds of experiences. And if you're meditating, they're very, often they're strikingly transpersonal, or having very little to do with your ordinary identity. Right. But this process that opens up through conversation and through perspectives has a very particular quality. There's a sort of intimacy with the ordinary self and its stories or whatever, and at the same time there's a lot of space and playfulness around it. And there's also a sense of the emotional tenor of things, almost like the way one appreciates art or film or plays or literature, where there's a way in which we're engaging it on an emotional or timbre level that one suddenly experiences in relationship to one's own life, which is quite a.
It's more visceral. It's more corporeal for me. It's like I feel it more palpably. I guess there's not so much. I think in a lot of instances there's this quality of learning or the pursuit of knowledge that's distanced from one's life. Even it's like a sort of a ruse that gets back to the idea of avoiding the experience. When one is confronted with the reality of one's life and the immediacy of the people and experiences in it, it reinvests it with a kind of nobility, I think, and a quality that sort of integrates one's perception of one's own life.
Yeah. So how do you use that, or how does that open up in your life as you live it? When you're cruising around doing your art and meeting your friends.
I think that, as I said, it does reinvest it with, the term nobility comes in, but also like a kind of, what would I say? There's a quality. There's a search for the sacred, or life having that immediacy. It kind of brings me always back to that sense of the moment, and the idea that these sort of goals, these elusive goals that we're always striving towards, be they in career or in relationship, become problematized by this kind of thinking, and it puts one back into that immediate fact of the circumstance as well, which is like what you were saying about the now, but also the now in a sort of ongoing dialogue that references one's whole life. So it feels like a dual motion that I think that makes life just gives it a sort of incandescent luminescence on a profound joy.
Hello?
Well, it's also just a remarkable, as I said, like one of the things is the relationship of friendship. I mean, I feel like just this experience of the last hour or whatever, the kind of discussion, the kind of way that the things were opened up really puts that sense of shared exploration that's part of friendship at the center of things. And I think we often miss that in our lives through achievement, through using people's who we meet to get ahead, or as only as entertainment or as relief, from the other things that we're doing that are more serious instead. There's something about that connection that's really intimate.
That it fills out the story. It allows you to visit places. So the friendship is a vehicle to exploration. What happens in the context as we personalize the relationship, they create betrayals and structures because they are, in fact, not literal relationships, but evocative ones.
All right, and on that note, we'll have to end
the creative life, the friendships that come into your life are part of it.
That's the theme music, Danny.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.